President JJ, fellow Rotarians, and guests. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually not going to launch into the presentation yet because, Rob, you just reminded me in my presentation, I don't talk about how I came to be standing here with County Magazine and my relationship with the Campbells. So because you segued so nicely into that, I just wanted to touch base on that for a second. So I took over Watershed last July. Jane Kelly, the founder, and I know each other well. She's friends with my uncle-in-law. And back in 2018, I was contemplating my future in journalism and reached out to Jane personally and said, if and when you're thinking of making a change with Watershed, I'd love for us to be able to have a conversation. So we talked for a bit then, and she was like, I'm not ready. I still got a lot of time and a lot of things to do. So that was 7 years in the making when she came to me in 2025 and said that she was ready to start thinking about next steps. So she and I had met after we had heard that Steve had passed away last September, and we had reserved a spot. We had already gone into production on the winter issue. So we had reserved a spot in the spring issue of Watershed, which is out right now or was just out. To pay homage to Steve and County Magazine and what he represented here in our community. And that was sort of the end of it. And then suddenly in January, I got this email, and Jane and Stephanie, who's here as well, was CC'd on this email in January from Ginny. I can't remember, actually, I don't have Ginny's last name. It's not Jimmy Campbell. What's Ginny's last name? Thank you. So it was with the Campbell kids. Mike and Chris and Ginny all reached out and said, we're looking for somebody who's interested in County Magazine. Would you be interested in a conversation? And in my head, I thought, well, I was going to reach out to them to get a quote for the story that I was writing about their dad in the spring issue. So this is a great way to get a quote from all three of them. I'll jump on a call with them. And then after about 10 minutes of talking with them, I fell in love with them. I felt like we were family. I learned a lot more about Steve and the contribution that he had made and the legacy that he had here. And as you'll see from my presentation, I'm a big believer in these legacy brands and in journalism in a local community and what it all means. And I realized that I didn't want anybody else to take over. I wanted to be the one that had the pleasure and the privilege of carrying on Steve's legacy. So that's why I'm here today. And that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about with you guys right now. Do you have my notes? I want to remind everybody, I am a Rotarian with the Rotary Club of Coburg. If you would ever like to come, please let me know and you can be my guest and it would be my pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to put down my paper and we can start the presentation. If I'm running the show, I will. Use the little arrow to change it when I'm ready.
You can just scroll up and down.
Oh, I scroll. Perfect. Yep. I can handle that. Perfect. I wonder if I should put it. Do I put it in presentation mode or do I leave it like this? Just leave it like this? Okay. So here we are. So I just want to start by saying I know nothing but magazines. I spent, I've been about 30 years working in the magazine industry. And when, as you'll see from this presentation, things went up and down in the magazine and the print world of publishing. And I'm very happy to still be standing and very appreciative of everything that I've gone through. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that, but let me start at the beginning. So this would be me with my two sisters. I grew up in a very small town, as we all kind of, well, I think we can all relate to most of that. I was born in Scarborough, Ontario, as my parents were moving from Richmond Hill to Gananoque. I was literally born on the way. They stopped in Scarborough, and we spent a couple of days there. And my father had an equestrian farm, and so we had that in Gananoque, and then we moved, my parents divorced when I was 4, and my mom was a single mom raising 3 girls, and we lived in about 8 different apartments before I was in 2nd grade, which, as Rob noted, was when I met my husband. And we had a very loving home. I was very fortunate. I had an amazing mom and amazing sisters. And unfortunately, my father passed away when I was in high school. So I grew up a house full of girls, and then married a man who only had brothers. So that was an interesting little journey for both of us. And I just wanted to sort of show that back when I was young, over here on the right, you might remember Reader's Digest. That was my reading of choice. And then, of course, I fell in love with Chickadee and Owl, which were magazines that we had when we were young. And that was a lot of fun. It was our entertainment for sure. So this is not me, but it kind of represents me when I was younger. My first job was pumping gas. I've had a job since I was 12 years old. I think I mentioned I come from a household full of love. There was not a lot of abundance. So we all worked. That was my list of jobs. So you can see I taught riding lessons at my dad's farm for a while as a gas station attendant, lifeguard, and swimming instructor, babysitter, cleaned chiropractic and medical offices. I was a waitress, did data entry at a commercial real estate firm, receptionist at Valley's Gym, and assistant to a VP of marketing, all before I graduated from university. So I worked a lot and I loved it. And I realized, as you can see here, I knew I was going to work for the rest of my life. I love working. I love making money. I love being independent. I like not having to rely on anybody. And so I figured I better find something that I love to do and figure out a way to make money doing it, which is also what I try to teach my 4 children. So going back up here, I plastered my walls growing up with magazines. I would tear out fashion. I would tear out places in the world that I longed to see. And so my whole wall was plastered with magazines. And that's when my mom said to me, you know, you're thinking of what you like to do. You've always been interested in magazines. I didn't realize it was a career until I found a program. It was at the time a graduate program at Ryerson, which is now TMU, in magazine journalism. And on the first day, we went around the room and there were a lot of very smart people in the room and everybody wanted to be a CBC correspondent or work for the BBC or, you know, be a financial analyst for the Globe and Mail. And I said, I want to work at a fashion magazine. And people kind of poo-pooed and laughed at me a little bit. But I loved fashion magazines. They talked about women's issues. They talked about things that were really important in the world from a different perspective. So it was definitely where I felt very comfortable. So off I went to New York. I got an internship between my first and second year at Harper's Bazaar, unpaid, borrowed $2,000 from my then boyfriend, now husband, slept on my friend's couch that I knew from university. And I put The Devil Wears Prada up there for anybody who's heard of the movie. Lauren was the author of that book. She worked at Vogue when I worked at Harper's Bazaar. I actually knew her. And her recount of what life was like in the 1990s in New York in fashion magazines was actually very accurate. So even though I didn't work for a boss like Anna Wintour, I had some great experiences. It was a lot of fun. It was the height of print journalism. Rolling Stone magazine, you know, all the models, there were supermodels on the covers of all the magazines, and they were known as the original influencers. They were the people that, you know, influenced fashion, they introduced travel, you know, you listen to them to know where to go for dinner, all of those fun things. So that is, I'm catching up to my notes, making sure I'm not doing too much badly here. The magazines were the cultural institutions. And it's interesting to note that my career mirrored the stage I was at in my life. So in my 20s, I worked at a fashion magazine. You'll see in shortly. In my 30s, I worked at a parenting magazine. In my 40s, I worked at a women's magazine called Chatelaine, which was all about working women and women in Canada. And then now in my 50s, I have Watershed and County magazine, all about living a quite lovely, quiet lifestyle in the country. So that was my sort of my foray into the industry. And as you know, the print magazine world has changed quite a lot. It has gone through some very highs and some very big lows, but I'll just sort of go over the golden era, which is when print magazine was thriving, advertising, you know, was the way we all made money. Magazine brands had huge influence. Editorial teams were big. We all had our own specialties. Readers went to the newsstand and bought magazines, a lot of them actually. And then of course, we all would go home, have our magazines, keep them for as long as we wanted, and then toss them aside, frankly. That's sort of how things went about. So I put in here The Knot. You might not know this, but The Knot was a wedding website that I worked at for a brief time in New York. And this was in the year 2000, which was the year I moved back to Canada. but it's important because it was a website. It wasn't a print magazine. And they poached me from Harper's Bazaar because I was a fashion and beauty editor, and they wanted a fashion and beauty editor to launch their print magazine. So they were a website first for brides, for weddings, and I launched their print magazine. But why that's important for me is because I learned the digital publishing world right from the very beginning. So again, back in 2000, when websites were just starting, advertisers were just starting to buy ads online. We really didn't know exactly what we were in for, but I was there at the very beginning. So here I am, because in 2001, I married my high school sweetheart, moved back to Canada, and had 4 children in less than 5 years. It was not planned, but it's how things happened. So you can see we are up here on the right. This is a picture that I had in Today's Parents and my little monsters. This was a picture that my kids replicated last year for my husband and I, our 25th wedding anniversary. So this is them then and then now, which is one of my favorite photos. So yeah, I was very fortunate. I got to stay home for 7 years and raise my little ones until they were, my youngest, who's now 6'3", when he went to JK. I went back to work and went right into editor-in-chief of Today's Parent, and then moved over to Chatelaine. So this is the beginning of the 2010s. And I think we all know what kind of happened during this time. It was the time when the internet, everybody was saying print was dead. Nobody wanted to read magazines. Nobody was reading newspapers. Advertisers didn't want to have anything to do with it. And it's a really interesting time, and I'll try to keep on task here. I could talk a lot about this, so if you have any questions afterwards, let me know. But what happened was advertisers said, oh, you can reach millions of people on the internet compared to the limited amount of people that you can reach in the print magazine. Plus, there's analytics. So you will be able to tell us how many people saw our ad. The problem is the analytics shot everybody in the foot, because they suddenly realized that what they thought was going to happen, which was their ad was going to be seen by millions of people, wasn't actually true. And people, as we learned through as the years went on, people don't relate to things on screens the way that they do in a tactile print way. So unfortunately, the ads that they were seeing on their devices didn't register and didn't mean as much to them as they did when they were seen in their trusted publications. Just a little bit of trivia there. So as the internet came, print advertising went down, the revenue in print advertising. Social media, don't get me started. It's not my favorite. It is a necessary evil for a lot of us that have businesses. Really, as a parent of 4 children, I don't want to go too far down that road, but I will definitely say we all drank the Kool-Aid, decided social media was where we needed to be, how we needed to spend our time. And I think what happened was we got to a point where we didn't know exactly what to do. We all got a little lost along the way. I'm going to come back to that in one slide. I just wanted to remind everybody and myself, the key here was I already had internet experience. So when I was able to lead my teams as an editor, when I first took over at Today's Parent, we had print magazine people and we had website people, and they didn't work together. So I was in charge of putting the teams together so that as editors, if you were writing a story, it wasn't now you were writing a story for a magazine, you were writing a story that would go, whether it was the magazine, whether it was on social media, whether it was on the website. It sounds really normal now, but at the time it was revolutionary. So we were merging all of the print teams together. We were creating new rules for editors. We were learning how the audience was digesting the content digitally. And so we had to write accordingly as well. So as journalists, we had to learn new ways of writing. So we realized, though, everything is still the same. Good storytelling mattered, trust matters, emotional connection matters, understanding our audiences mattered, and engaging and supporting our community was what it was all about. However, this is what I was saying. We suddenly looked up and we're like, what are we doing? This is a very typical thing that I think we can all relate to. Our attention spans were different. We're digesting content in seconds rather than minutes and spending time educating ourselves and learning things. Algorithms started feeding us what we were supposed to be wanting rather than using our own brains to decide what it is we wanted to consume. And you know that local journalism started to go away. There was not funding to have local newspapers the way I know Picton Gazette, the longest running printed newspaper in Canada, right? Yeah, which is amazing. So anyways, so all of these things culminated in people not trusting media anymore because it was coming from everywhere. And I'm going to talk about influencers in a second. But what goes around comes around. So what happens now, or what's happening now in the last 2 to 3 years, is people are recognizing that what they're reading on their screens and what they're being fed isn't necessarily trustworthy. I'm sure we can all agree sometimes when we're reading things that we've seen on our computers or we're Googling something, kind of have to ask yourself, especially now with AI, how much of this is true? I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll Google who won the Habs game and you can get an answer, but then you have to sometimes question, are all of the facts true? Is the win-loss thing, it is usually true. Sometimes the details, they'll get lost, right? So that's why print is having a resurgence now. So people are recognizing that there is value behind the printed word because frankly, it costs more. So we spend money making it the best possible product that we can. So there's authenticity, there's a relationship, there's a tactile relationship that I was talking about. People really want to have more time to spend with what it is, whatever they're choosing to do. So there's a big thing. This is right here. This is an article that Good Housekeeping recently did. But they call it granny habits or granny not habits. What am I trying to say? Hobbies. Thank you. Yes, I couldn't get the word. Granny hobbies, knitting and crocheting and quilting and all of these things that I grew up doing. And, you know, there's a whole generation now that's rediscovering these things. And we're recognizing how beneficial it is for our brains, for longevity, for our health. So many reasons to take a step back and step away from our screens and recognize how important being involved with what it is that we're spending our time doing, being in the moment. So this brings us a little bit more to where we are now, which is we're increasingly overwhelmed by digital overload. You guys know now, my kids are between the ages of 19 and 24, and they are even saying that they recognize how unhealthy it is to be on their phones all the time. They want to put their phones away. They want to do things as a family. They want to spend time with their friends. They want experiences. They want to go to events. They want to go to music festivals. Oh, I just about went off on a tangent. I'm going to try to focus, and there's a lot to be said about how we want to spend our time. But I'll get back on track here and just remind everybody that local media is possibly the biggest victim to all of this sort of digital and AI consumerism. Meaning, where are you going to find an article about Rob Leake and the amazing things that he does for the Rotary Club, for example? Sorry, JJ, I could have used you too. Right? Okay. So AI can't tell you that. You can't get a quote from Rob or JJ about that. Local media has to be in person. It has to be intimate. It has to be, and it is a very authoritative and authentic way of documenting what we're doing in life, how we're living our lives, how we're spending time with each other. So there is a niche happening with publishing. Sorry, there's a trend happening. I guess it's not the word I want, but there's something happening in publishing now where niche, meaning local, or meaning if you wanted to do learn more about quilting, like something that's really small and pointed. When it comes to media, that's where we come in. We can provide, meaning whether it's County Magazine, whether it's Watershed, whether you're the Picton Gazette, these are publications that are documenting history and documenting our lives here. It's really important that we all continue to look at and to be a part of and to contribute and help each other, which is where I'm going to get to next, which is this is why community matters more now than ever. So our communities need each other. We need to, as you know, as Rotarians, we need to be involved in what is happening around us. That can never be replaced with a digital lifestyle or with artificial intelligence. So it's really important for us to make that conscious decision to spend time in our communities, helping each other, talking to each other, documenting what is happening now, so that 25 years from now, we don't have to wonder whether or not it's the truth. What was life like? We're all here now, we're all doing it. And being able to support each other and continue to do that is really why I bought Watershed and I bought county magazines. I feel very strongly that it is our responsibility to document this and to be historians for our time, so that generations from now, we have something tangible that people can actually read and know what life was like. So that's sort of why, one of the reasons why I am here doing what I'm doing. So on that note, I did do something with AI though. I took a photo of County Magazine, our shop, my shop in Bloomfield, and ran it through AI. And I said, what would you do if this was your shop? And so this is an AI generated photo of County Magazine with my personal aesthetic. Because I just wanted to show you that there are times where it's fun to use AI. It's not something we should be afraid of. As a journalist, I need to learn how to use it and what to do with it. But at the end of the day, it can never replace what it is that we are doing as authentic journalists and documenting our lives as we know it. It's cute, right? I thought you'd like to work there, Jan, wouldn't you? I think so. So there's a couple of things. You just don't judge a book by its cover. It's one of the philosophies I live by. And also there's two sides to every story. And I think those are really important things to walk away with and to carry with us every day. And I believe in these legacy brands, and someone needs to record and preserve the history of our towns and the people who make it great. And I know somebody who might be interested in doing that. And there I am with my Frenchie Star-Lord. If you guys ever watched Guardians of the Galaxy, it's a movie, and that's his name, Star-Lord. And I think local is the new black. I think local is the new cool. I think it is the place I know I want to spend my time and certainly the rest of my career. So that's why I'm here. And now I would love to open it up to questions, talk a little bit more pointed about what you're interested in hearing from me now that you know a little bit more about my background, because there's a lot. I could have talked a lot, and I would still love to talk more about what you guys are interested in learning about County Magazine and where we might be going with this and what the future looks like.